You know, every major scientific field has its legends, but not many of them start with a secret meeting in a hotel room that, well, basically changed everything. Today, we're going to unpack the super unlikely, do-it-yourself origin story of a scientific society and the two major journals it literally created from scratch.
Yeah. What does it take, really? Is it some singular, brilliant breakthrough, or a really charismatic leader? Or maybe is it something a lot simpler, like a group of really frustrated scientists who just get fed up with the old way of doing things and decide, you know what, we're going to build our own world?
So to really get this rebellion, you first have to understand the world they were rebelling against. For this group of scientists, the 1950s were a deeply frustrating time. They knew they were onto something new, but it felt like nobody wanted to listen.
There was this group of psychologists, and they were inspired by the incredible work of B.F. Skinner. They were pioneering a whole new field, focused on what's called operant conditioning, which is a really powerful way to understand why we do the things we do, and they knew they were onto something huge.
But, and this is a big but, there was a problem. The gatekeepers of science, the editors of the big prestigious psychology journals, they were not impressed at all. In fact, the source material calls the journals back then not hospitable to this new approach. For these pioneers, the doors were just firmly locked.
So what was the big deal? Well, their methods were just different. The establishment, they loved large group studies and formal hypothesis testing. They thought that was the only way to get real results. But this new group, they did things differently. They focused intensely on the behavior of individual subjects, like watching a single rat or a single pigeon over a long time. Their whole approach just didn't fit the mold, and because of that, their work got rejected again and again.
And that's when unhappiness turned into action. Now, this wasn't some formal, planned-out coup. It was a moment of pure necessity that happened, of all places, in a New York City hotel room.
Okay, what's so cool about this is just how informal it all was. I mean, look at this. This isn't some fancy academic hall. It's a bedroom in the Statler Hotel during a psychology conference. This is where a group of them met and decided that if the establishment wouldn't give them a place for their research, fine. They'd just build one themselves.
This right here, this is the call to arms. Charles Forster passed this memo around right before that meeting. You can just feel the frustration in his words, right? But also the determination. He's not just complaining, he's proposing a solution. He's saying, let's start our own journal.
So they didn't just decide to create a journal. They decided to totally reinvent how a journal could even work. They came up with this system built by researchers, for researchers, completely from the ground up.
I mean, their editorial policy was completely radical for the time. Instead of one super powerful editor-in-chief, they imagined this large board of editors. Any one of them could accept a paper. And get this, an editor couldn't force an author to make changes. The power was put back into the hands of the actual scientist. It was a truly revolutionary idea, designed to protect new and maybe even weird work.
And this just brilliantly illustrates the whole DIY spirit of the project. On the left, you've got this handwritten letter with a little rough sketch of what the cover could look like, and then on the right, boom, the polished, professional cover of the very first issue. This was a grassroots effort from start to finish. To pull this off, they had to do everything themselves. They formed a nonprofit, the Society for the Experimental Analysis of Behavior, or SEAB, so they could be their own publisher. One of the founders' wives, Marilyn Forster, actually typed the first two issues on a special typewriter, typing every single line twice just to make the right-hand margins even. I mean, can you even imagine that? That is some serious dedication.
So, when it was finally time to go to press, they had to make a really big bet. They told the printer to make 1,200 copies of the very first issue of their new journal, the Journal of the Experimental Analysis of Behavior, or JEAB. That was a really bold, optimistic number.
But here's the kicker. How many subscribers did they actually have at the time? Just 286. They printed over 4 times the number of copies they actually had subscribers for. The source material calls this an act of faith. And yeah, it's hard to disagree. They really believed that if they built it, the community would show up.
And guess what? That act of faith, it totally paid off. JAB was a success, a huge success actually. So much so that just 10 years later, it sparked a second revolution, this time focused not just on lab experiments, but on actually changing the world.
This timeline just shows how quickly everything started to evolve. So JEB launches in '58, right? It's all about basic science. But almost immediately, by 1959, the conversation starts about needing a home for applications. Research that used their principles to solve real-world problems. It took another 8 years of hard work, but by 1968, they launched their second journal. And look, if the need for the first journal was clear, the need for this new journal was just overwhelming. You had researchers out there using these principles to help autistic children, to make classrooms better, to solve all kinds of clinical problems. They desperately needed a place to publish their findings, and the demand was absolutely immense.
Just look at this comparison. It says it all. JAB started with 286 subscribers. The new Journal of Applied Behavior Analysis, or JABA, it launched with over 1,200. This wasn't just a quiet success, it was an absolute explosion. It proved they had tapped into this massive unmet need in the scientific world.
So what was the end result of that hotel room rebellion? It wasn't just 2 journals, it was the birth of an entire field, with a legacy that we can actually watch expanding over time.
When JEAB first started, its editorial board was really tiny and all clustered in one spot. The source even calls it an Eastern Club. All 16 members were east of the Mississippi River, mostly squished into that Boston to Washington corridor. But now look at the map just a couple of decades later. Boom! The board has more than doubled in size, and its members are spread all across North America, with new international editors in Mexico, Great Britain, and New Zealand. This map is literally a picture of a scientific field coming into its own. And JABA, the Applied Journal, created its own center of gravity. When it launched, its board had this really distinct Midwestern feel, with a major hub at the University of Kansas. So it wasn't just some offshoot, it was a brand new intellectual powerhouse.
And the growth was just phenomenal. By 1986, the paid circulation for JABA alone was over 5,000. I mean, think about that. From a secret meeting in a hotel room to a thriving global community in less than 30 years. It is an incredible story of how a small group of determined outsiders can build a new establishment, completely on their own terms.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What revolutionary ideas are being turned away by the gatekeepers of today? And maybe more importantly, where is that next generation of pioneers, sitting in a hotel room or a coffee shop right now, planning to build the future themselves?